Right, GB News can exclusively reveal the full scale of the crisis in the Channel, with a maritime security source telling us that both French and British border controls are now completely overwhelmed.
Yesterday alone, almost 1,200 migrants crossed the Channel, marking the highest daily total ever recorded, 43% higher than this very time last year.
And it also means that British and French lifeboats and fishing vessels had to step in because official resources buckled under the pressure.
Well, let's get more with our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Morning, Mark. This is remarkable. We don't know whether there was something extraordinary about yesterday or whether it's going to happen again today with those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely astonishing scenes. As I explained to you, really, what happened yesterday, I want to show you, first of all, images from our friends at the Press Association who were on the other side of the Channel and filmed as dozens, hundreds of migrants clambered aboard these boats on the beaches of France. You can see them there heading out. This is not far from Dunkirk, between Calais and Dunkirk. They're waiting for what they call a taxi boat. So the boats come up from further down the coast. They come in to the shallow waters and people just wade out to those small boats. And you can see that boat there absolutely packed to the gunwales. 18 small boats made the crossing yesterday with an average of more than 65 people on board each of these boats. Now, you may ask, where on earth are the French police that we're paying £500 million in assistance to step up their security? Well, there were some French police, but they were effectively standing by and documenting what we're seeing. They are in vehicles just further up the beach, taking pictures and really just watching what is unfolding here in France. It is absolutely extraordinary, and because so many people were crossing from France to the UK, it completely, for a while, overwhelmed the ability of border patrol vessels in France and the UK to cope with this. They had to call in the assistance of lifeboats from France and lifeboats from the UK to help as well. And in addition to that, they were so overwhelmed at a time. There were emergencies, as is normal on a sort of a sunny day in the Channel, that were coming into the Coast Guard. A yacht that had got into trouble, that was taking in water, kayaks that had got into trouble. The Coast Guard had to call in the assistance of local fishing boats to help those stricken vessels until they could redeploy their maritime assets to get there, because they were all tied up dealing with the spectacle here of the thousands of migrants crossing. And our producer now in Kent estimates that the number who crossed yesterday was just shy of 1,200. I want to show you some more video now that this was taken by our producer on the other side of the Channel that starkly illustrates what the authorities were up against. You see a lifeboat, that's the Dungeness lifeboat, coming in to the harbour at Dover to the migrant processing centre, but it was lifeboat after border force vessel after lifeboat. Our producer said he had never seen anything like it. There were back-to-back arrivals, and at one point they were all stacked at the entrance to the harbour. They couldn't get in. And you asked in your introduction, Anne, what was at play here. Well, it was because we had a break in the weather. We had a week of not very good weather where these small boats could not get across the English Channel because it just wasn't passable with the winds whipping up the waves. So anytime the weather improves, this is what we see. But the important thing to get out and across about this is the government has been telling us about their programme to smash the gangs, and they've shown us successes that they've had to arrest suspected people smugglers and to dismantle supply lines. But the thing about the improvement in the weather is, you know, it shines a light on those efforts in the most extraordinary way, because we see that those efforts actually in the round are making no difference really at all. These are the images I was talking about before of the vessels just queuing up at the entrance to Dover Harbour, the most extraordinary scenes. And if that effort to smash the gangs really was coming up with the results and paying dividends, it would not matter that we're having a run of good weather days. You just wouldn't see the same kind of numbers crossing, because the people smuggling gangs have been smashed and dismantled and would find it far more difficult to get the boats across there. And I think just a final point on this. The really worrying thing about what we saw yesterday is this is just the end of May. We don't normally see in a year occasionally numbers touching 1,000 until much later in the year, the very height of summer, sort of August time, when you're guaranteed a big run of flat calm conditions. And then you can see some days you might get up to 1,000. Well, this was almost 1,200 yesterday. And so early on in the season, it is, I think, a portent of what we can expect going into the summer properly.
OK, Mark, for now, thank you. Let's talk to political commentator Theo Usherwood. It's like the government's playing a game of whack-a-mole here and telling us, we will win. We definitely will win. Clearly nothing is happening.
If you speak to those who've worked at the sharp end of what Mark is describing in his excellent reporting, you've had a producer down on the Kent coast, if you speak to those at the sharp end, you're talking to people like Tony Smith, former Border Force commander over in Calais. They all say the same thing. You can't just solve this problem by smashing the gangs, because as long as you've got the demand, then another gang is going to come through, and another gang, and another gang. Once you arrest people and put people away, there's always going to be a replacement as long as the demand is there. You have to deal, their opinion, and their expert opinion, because they've been at the front line, with the demand. So you have to stop the trade. And if you manage to stop the trade and you can stop the crossings, because people who arrive in this country are immediately, there is a deterrent, and you would think the obvious one, and that's why the Conservatives thought of it, was Rwanda. Nigel Farage has said at the beginning of last week about being taken, not even being allowed to land in this country. You'd have to go to an offshore processing centre. Then that removes any interest somebody might have in coming to this country. And then you can get order on the situation. And then once you have that, you can then create a system whereby actually the British public will say, OK, that's reasonable, that sounds fair. But to what you were saying earlier, Anne, when your viewers watch these pictures, they see what's happening in the English Channel, they are naturally worried. I'm not saying that people who are crossing the Channel are criminals. I'm just saying we don't know who they are. We don't know. They often will come over undocumented. They'll come without their passports. We don't necessarily have the intelligence sharing with the countries of their countries of origin.
So we don't know young men.
There were, and I also saw some pictures from the Press Association, and you can see them there of women and children as well. There is that particular photograph on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, granted that they are all young men in that picture.
But why, given that they are coming here illegally, and it couldn't be plainer to see, why aren't we treating them like criminals?
Well, there isn't the capacity within the system. And there's something like, I think, 1,700 detention places. We're talking, you had 1,200 arriving, your producer counted, arriving yesterday alone. There simply isn't the capacity within the prison system. There isn't the ability, we looked at, I think even the last government set something up in Manston, which was overrun and soon started festering diseases. There isn't, so therefore these people go into houses of multiple occupancy and hotels.
I mean, the issue with this is, just briefly, Theo, is that people will look at this and say, that's enough now. Urgent action is needed. And this whole smash the gangs rhetoric is not urgent action. Even if it worked, it's not urgent action.
Completely agree, 100%. I think anybody, I don't even think necessarily if you're on the right, if your views are on the right, you're looking at this particular issue and saying, this is an issue, this is something which is enough. But the problem is that for Keir Starmer, we've been talking about Lord Hermer as Attorney General, they're not willing to countenance changing the law in a way that would allow them to implement a scheme like Rwanda. They want to go through the official way of doing it, remaining part of international treaties, remaining part of the ECHR, and then setting up return agreements, either with, obviously they've got the countries of origin, but then with countries in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, where they could have potentially return hubs and people would go to those. But we saw it, those treaties are very difficult to negotiate. He went all the way to Albania, stood on a podium with the Albanian Prime Minister, and the Albanian Prime Minister said, no, I'm speaking to Giorgia Meloni, not with me, thanks. So it will take time as well, but ultimately this is only, it feels like every Sunday or even every day of the week when you get these photographs, it's just an advert for Nigel Farage and Reform, because he's saying he's offering a different alternative that the Prime Minister is not willing to countenance.
Yeah, we all know it, and we're watching the pictures still of all of these people arriving, and nothing seems to be happening.
And it's just worth mentioning they're victims, there's regardless of what your view is of this trade, these are people who've left their country to come to this country. It is not, they are victims of human trafficking at the very least.
OK, Theo, thank you.
Yeah, and I suppose the business model must be good because they keep doing it, don't they, the smugglers? If that's what they are, people smugglers. Anyway, look, we've got to read this out. I don't think you'll be very impressed by it generally, but it's a Home Office statement. They told GB News that they want to end dangerous small boat crossings, which threaten lives and undermine border security, and will stop at nothing to dismantle their business models and bring them to justice. Impressive, huh?
It's all good. Fair enough saying it.
Good words.
We need to see something
But that's all
happening.
they are.